3. It says we're live. So, good evening and welcome to the... Oh, I can hear feedback.
On me?
Or it could be me. Stand by. It could be me. Right, yeah, that's sorted. Apologies, I forgot the old system because I'm watching it as well. That it was playing back. Good evening and welcome to the Way of Conscious Mindfulness, a weekly podcast and YouTube and Facebook now show discussing spirituality and science, balancing health and well-being with mind, body, and spirit, with a Taoist twist. What is the Tao? The Tao means the way, the path, the balance. Now, we are not the normal talk show, surprise, surprise. Each week, each session, we have a different guest or subject. Today, no exception, we have a wonderful guest, which we'll talk to in a minute. But the aim of the show is to have an open discussion to help us all find new skills, new techniques, new techniques and skills to balance our own personal Tao way or path. Now, as I said, we had a few difficulties. We were on Facebook Live. I did think that if you weren't on Facebook, you could still go on there, but apparently you can't. So
they want you to drink the Kool-Aid.
Indeed. With the Facebook Kool-Aid, which is a very unique flavour. But anyway, we digress. So yes, so I've had about it a bit. I've gone back to YouTube, the old trusty, the old version, and we're on Google Hangouts, and people are starting to trickle in, and that's all good. So it is the show. This is the show, The Way of Michele Roberts-Bonn. Is that your? Did I get that not correct? Because I didn't check.
That's perfect. Yep. Thank you.
Come on. Thank you. I do like to try to get things right. So this is The Way of Michele Roberts-Bonn, and or at least one of the titles is The Way of Psychic Empath and Animal Protector. Or that's I didn't get a chance to actually ask you sort of what you wanted to talk about, and that resonated. That popped up when I was looking at your stuff. That popped up, and it's we're going to do that. Well, at least we'll start maybe doing that. So I'm doing it because it's all different now. I'm just doing it a different way. That we've got the lovely Susanna. The lovely Susie saying hello, gorgeous people, and we got Fred Bleach saying good save, as in flipping, going from flipping it from one thing to another. Yeah, it's what I'm pretty good at, apparently. So, good evening, Michele. Firstly, how are you doing after the?
I'm very well. It is a little after 2, like almost 3 p.m. here in the States, and it's a muggy day in Northern Virginia. Very dewy, hot, lots of rain and thunderstorms, and scared dogs and cats that need to be comforted, but I'm well, thank you.
Good. And that's quite funny because it's 10 to 8 now here in the UK, and it is a bit muggy. I mean, we're not the British. The only thing we're used to is rain, and normally, so I'm sure there'll be quite a few people complaining about the mugginess. It's not actually that muggy, but it is a little bit. It is a little bit on the humid side, but it is a beautiful sunny day out there. I think you can just see from all the light coming off from the side over there.
Well, I'm actually quite jealous because I was in Glastonbury in January doing a little bit of personal research, but my mother is British, so half my family is British, and I would like to be there right now in the warmer months. So I certainly appreciate that, but I'm there with you in spirit. Thank you.
As always. That's interesting. We'll definitely pop onto the Glastonbury thing then a bit later. So the ultimate question, the question that's taken me 5 minutes to get to is the question I ask. So this is the way, the way of Michele Roberts-Bonn. So Michele, what is your way? What is your Tao? What is your path?
I think more and more as I age, evolution, I have to just say that's the first word that's popping into my mind. The way for me is just evolutionary. I don't feel comfortable anymore making a statement about who I am, because once I do that, I find either it's an error or it's simply another life pattern and something changes quite drastically later. And I'm sure a lot of people have seen those things in their own life experiences. You set out thinking one thing is meant for you, either spiritually or any other avenue in life, and things take a turn. And so part of my way, part of my path is accepting that evolution and not giving it a good or a bad descriptor, but saying, let's learn from this. And I will say, just as a human being, I'm learning how to do that. I am definitely not a professional and I am not an expert, and I will not say I'm an expert in anything. And I can say, as a student, to hear that from someone else is so vital, so important, because you don't have to come into anything pretending that you know something or worrying that you don't know something. So that is the best thing for me. I can certainly say for my path, on my way of spirituality, it's never been a peaceful path. And I don't mean that that's negative, but a lot of people put a spin on spirituality that it's all, but glory lights. And it's wonderful. That's great if that's what happens to people. But don't be upset if it's not you. I know it's not me. I think a lot of people have had hard knocks in life. And if you could take them, learn from them, and actually laugh about them, that's great. So that's another word I'll throw in there, is humor. So many weird things have happened to me in the past 4 years, maybe 5. And I used to get terrified. I was terrified of some of these things. What do they mean? It's like, maybe we're not supposed to know some of these things, and it's okay to make fun of them. You're not being judged. So I'm not going to judge people as much as I used to. I can honestly say I've been the toughest self-critic, the most biggest judge of myself. Even when other people had said, "Oh, you did very well with this," I'm like, I don't feel like I did, whether it's a spiritual task or any other thing in life, whether I'm, washing the car, whatever. So basically for me right now, everything's up for grabs. That's my path, because I didn't think I'd be married at 39. I didn't think I'd have cancer. I didn't think that I would live with mental illness and go through a suicide attempt at 36. I'm now 50. And I see a lot of these things happen to other people, and we can classify them as something in one sense and say, oh, this is what this means when people behave in this manner. But I've learned through spirituality that no, that's not true. People learn in different ways. People communicate in different ways. And it is part of our job as spirits having a human experience to accept that and not judge it. And I will say, I'm not an expert on this. I am a student as well. And it's my job, I feel, to seek out other students.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's awesome. And it resonates with sort of things I know and all the things I sort of follow. Sifu. Sifu means it. On some translations, it means father, but it actually means parent. So because both male and female can be sifu, but a sifu is like a parent. So therefore, well, at least a good parent should guide, should point you in that direction, should not necessarily be commanding you and telling you what to do. That's the role of a sensei. That's the role of a master. Is this thing of like I'm at the top and you're the bottom. but with the Sifu structure, it's very more this guide, pointing you in the direction, in the right direction. And I love the fact, you're saying, well, there was two things there. I mean, like, firstly, this thing of or somebody tried to say like spirituality. Oh, spirituality is all all peace and it's like it's. I mean, it's that I find that really interesting in the essence of there's this thing with. Originally enlightenment in martial, because in the Eastern philosophy martial arts is not about fighting really. Fighting's a cherry on top of the cake. Martial arts is actually about personal development, so it's the 3 M's: martial, medical, and meditational. And they talk a lot about enlightenment, but there's this great one in both the Taoist but also the Zen, so the Japanese, the Zen way of thinking about enlightenment. They say the guy spent 20 years sweeping the floor, meditating, eating his crops. He reached enlightenment. The next day, he was sweeping the floor, meditating, eating his crops. So the point is, enlightenment is just another level. And I think the same is said with spirituality, and I think the same is said with ascension. People talk about ascension, and I think they think that everything's going to change and everything's going to flip on its head. And at least with my Sifus, my understanding of ascension is there are certain things that when you're enlightened, if we put it that way, you sort of have more realizations. You see, you are connected more with the spirit world. You see your past lives. You see your future lives to a certain degree. You see far more in front of you. And this whole thing of ascension is actually just everybody getting to that level. That level where people realize, wake up to actually this isn't the be all and end all. We are actually all interconnected. You can manifest things. It takes practice, but you can manifest things, and the more people come together, make it easier. But all these things that at the moment are very woo woo, and very spiritual and very eventually the whole idea of ascension. That's my new. Well, I've always used woo woo and hairy fairy, but I quite like now. That's my new one. Thanks to you.
I expect to see that more often.
Yeah. So there is this thing of, and I think that's the thing with spirituality. You get kicked in the butt. I think for at least a lot of people. It does.
That's true. You're saying a lot of key words that do resonate with me. I was certified, and I say that loosely when they say I am a certified medium. Well, what does that mean? Who are you certified by? To me, that doesn't mean as much. It's like saying, well, I'm a certified Reiki master practitioner. Great, for legal purposes to practice, that's fantastic. I'm also an ordained minister, but whatever. The meaning it gives me is that I know I need to keep practicing, and I need to look at what my weaknesses are and what my strengths are and to integrate them. And in terms of the word ascension, I was in a journey group a couple of weeks ago, and that's a new thing for me is studying shamanism. And the shamanic practitioner who I've been working with, she's the perfect person to just laugh and joke and point at each other about, people wanting to get to the ascension and find that light. It's like, well, yeah, it's there, but it's everywhere and it's within us at all times. And to me, the ascension basically is when you're gone from this body and when you've realized there is no past, there is no present, there is no future, it's all one, and we are all interconnected. Maybe someone has had other experiences, and I am happy to hear them. But I kind of joke and I go, someone actually asked me in that class, which is so weird that you would bring up that word. Well, what is ascension? And I went, well, it's when you're dead. And I mean, maybe that's just a very blatant way of saying it. But I think we forget that we are all going to ascend, whether we're ready or not. We may get stuck here as spirit because we're hung up about something. And I've certainly run into spirits that have done that. But I also know we are spirit having human experiences. So therefore, don't forego your time here on earth. And I can tell you from my own worst enemy, hello, looking at me right now in the face. We have this expectation, and maybe we can get past a hard point in life and then we'll be okay. It's like, this is the journey, my friends. This is the journey. Om Shanti Shanti, whatever you want to call it. I'm all for it. And if I could find peace in one day of my life, I would be great. But I think the wonderful thing about knowing that usually isn't possible is that I can look at a friend or my husband and crack up maniacally laughing about how silly something was. That is a good learning experience. The humor for me is the best. I can say just historically for me, I was always inflexible. There are still moments in my life where I am still inflexible about things, and realizing that, yeah, that's not helping me. It's not helping me. It's not helping anyone. And just to kind of let that go and actually breathe in and out and realize it's okay. You move on, you move forward, and you just take what comes. That is just
breathing
as a
is good.
human. Well, and it is. And I mean, but it certainly isn't the entirety of the process. But I can tell you from my own perspective in the childhood I grew up in, I didn't breathe well. I held my breath a lot. I was always tense in my stomach, my abdomen, my torso. And I remember, as a child, I studied ballet. And it was always the tendency to suck everything in. But then they tell you to breathe. Well, that's the complete antithesis to relaxing. It never made sense to me. And then I got into acting when I was a young person. And I had a professor that would always joke and say, 2-year-old tummy, 2-year-old tummy. And I'd be like, what the hell do you want from me? Suck it in, let it out. Which one is it? I can't breathe. That's where I come from. And I don't think it's unlikely that a lot of people seeking a spiritual path, no matter what it is, if you're at that point, it's okay. It's okay. But I can tell you, I am so aware now of times when I am breathing well and how well it feels. And there's a little bit of grief with that because I'm like, oh my God, how many years have I gone through not being aware of that? That's the painful part that you have to work through in spirituality. And since to me, time is like a meaningless thing. I think time is really just an illusion, at least here on Earth. We have a structure. I can tell you from the things that I've seen, probably maybe since 5 or 6 years ago, I look outside on cloudy days in a certain light and I see a mist in the air everywhere. And at first I thought, oh, it's raining. And I'd go closer out the window and there's no rain out there. And I'd be like, what am I seeing? I thought my eyes are going bad. Well, yeah, they kind of are because I'm getting older. But there have been times in my life where I prominently see this mist, and it's not every single day. It's not in all kinds of light, but I have come to understand that it is something else that is merging into our world. Some people say it's the fifth dimension. Some people say, oh, it's spirit. I don't quite know what it is, but I also know that it has boundaries that I can actually control in my own home. If I don't want to see it in my home, I can make it leave. It further came to a point where after I received a cancer diagnosis, I was treated. I'm fine now. But there were images coming through the tile in the shower. And if you talk to anybody who's a professional in psychology or a psychiatry doctor, they're going to tell you, oh, that's pareidolia. You're just imagining it. It's not. It keeps coming through. And it became clear to me that there was something going on. I have a portal in my bathroom. Who knew? It's the weirdest thing. But what happened was this portal is basically attached to springs running underground in my town, hence Springfield. That's what the town is. It's a natural flow of energy. And the thing is, it's always been there. It's not going anywhere. I had a shamanic practitioner come in and kind of work with it to move it outside the house, because I was getting little things coming in and showing me their faces. I'd turn over at night and be like, wow, what is that? And I didn't know what it was. Well, I'm through my learning, it's Davic kingdom members, it's elementals, just little beings that, you know, I used to think garden gnomes that people put in their yards were really ugly. Well, these things aren't too attractive either, but I'm coming to understand that they have these consciousness. There are things everywhere that we may never see, we may not understand. We may see them and talk to them. So I can't say I talk with them because I don't really perceive messages. I'm definitely perceiving, sounds. I definitely perceive vision. That's been with me since childhood. I definitely perceive things through animals and their perceptions. So I won't call myself a medium because I'm stuck at that point. I don't know if that's something that's meant for me to do. And I do have other, adjuncts, other avenues, people who I trust who, one is an angelic communicator, one is the shamanic practitioner who I trust. And I'm able to work and figure out, well, why is this causing me distress? What's going on with the dude in my bathroom, and I can joke about it and I say it in a funny way, but I can understand how people shut down that, as children, we're certainly able to perceive those things. And I know I was, but based on my way of living as a child, and, I came from an abusive background, I shut that stuff down for a very long time. Well, I can guarantee you it will come creeping in when it sees an avenue and thinks that you're ready to hear it. And maybe that rings a bell for some of your viewers. That would be interesting to hear about.
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, guys, if this rings a bell, please message. I'm not got my normal system, but I can still see the messages just about, so I can have a look. But yeah, there's some really interesting things that you said there. Where do I start? Right, going back to like the whole thing about the Taoist Tao. In the West, we call Taoism a religion, but technically, religion comes from the Latin word religio, which means bond with a supreme being. Buddhism and Taoism, technically, you are the supreme being. You are God. Everything is God. So technically, they're not religions because of the word religio. But that's a boggy thing. It's a seafood boggy thing. But anyway, so the interesting thing in Taoism, they say, is that you should be like a child. You should play like a child or be like a child, but take responsibility like an adult. Meaning is that us adults, we take things far too blooming seriously. And even when people get into spirituality, it's like, and you start seeing all this energy and you see the different spirits and you see that's cool, but don't get too serious about, don't start, the this or that, or the Illuminati's doing this or McDonald's is doing that. You get caught up in too much of the dogma. And that's what's, that's the problem. That's been an issue in religions, is all the dogma, all the rules, because one thing through part of my studies, I was taught, my Sifus taught me to, study. The more you learn, the more you grow. The more you grow, the more you learn. And everything you learn enhances and empowers everything else you do. That was the basic philosophy to everything I do, the basic philosophy to my Taoism. So I studied religions, and the interesting thing in religion is when you go to the original texts, they're all really similar. They're all talking about unconditional love. They're all talking about the oneness of the universe. It's as you get more into modern time, and you have priests or people actually talking about this. This is where different interpretations come through in, and you start getting the splits off. You start losing some of that way. So one of the biggest things for me is, as a human, as well, for me, I think you pretty much said it in a way, is that we're spiritual beings in a human body. And I can go on with science. Quantum physics actually says there's a 99% possibility that this is a simulation, a virtual reality, because there's certain things. But again, you go back to the ancient texts. This is a dream. This is an illusion. Even I'll go forget his name again. Even a playwright, I can't remember his name, but even a playwright said, "We are mere actors on a stage."
Oh, Shakespeare.
Yeah. Shakespeare, thank you. I can remember
that guy.
Yeah, that guy, the English guy that I should know. I can remember great reams of information, but names. It's like faces. I could remember your face from 25 years ago. I can't remember your name from yesterday, let alone 25 years ago. But there's certain things I'm good at and certain things I'm not. But that's all of us. That's what it's all about.
That is interesting that you say that. I mean, in terms of, if you reflect on, what we seem to impose as our responsibility here on earth as a human. And I didn't really understand that. I do believe that we all have had multiple lifetimes. I don't know what that means. I don't know how many lifetimes each person will have. I think that is determined by the soul that you are and whomever is your guide or guides. And of course, religion will give you a different spin on that. They put the parameters, and that's the human part. We're always putting restrictions and parameters on things. And I do it too. I'm human. Something's making me go back to when I was in acting school in my early 20s. A mime artist by the name of Samuel Avital, who worked with Marcel Marceau. He had a school in Colorado. It may actually still exist. I'm not sure if Mr. Avital is still alive, but he came and he gave a workshop. And I was very young and I felt intimidated. And I never forgot something that he said. And there are some things, my memory is quite good. I can remember things far back and things that people have long forgotten. That's just who I am. But there are things that I don't forget, and they come back around. When he was signing a workbook for the students, he said to us, he said, God created the world so that he might be known. And it just rang a bell with me, that does mean something about humans wanting to be heard, humans wanting to be known in various capacities. Or is that the soul inside burning to learn and to know? It's just a simple statement like that. And it helps you switch gears. It helps you look at different perspectives. And that can be a difficult thing to do in this world with the parameters we put on each other and ourselves.
Mm. Yeah. So, and this is the thing about parameters. There's an old saying of there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And the other thing of that is that the only rules that exist are the ones that we make, right. in essence. And it's like I say, I'm a little bit of a surprise. I'm a little bit of an oddball. I love
spirit. Are you really? You're an oddball?
I love science, so I love quantum physics, especially quantum physics, because quantum physics is like let's get all the rules, let's stick them in a pot, let's shake it up and down, mix it all up, then throw it back out, and let's see what happens.
You really sound like John Cleese as you're saying that. I'm thinking like the Holy Grail. That's awesome.
Oh, well, I am a bit of a Monty Python fan and Carry On Camping. Somebody once called me. I'm a spiritual cross between Jim Carrey and Robbie Williams. Apparently,
there you go. There you go.
Yeah. But so the thing with science is that, you know, I love science because, especially quantum physics, because there's things in quantum physics that are still not in the mainstream. The mainstream science and the you know, the public eye says, oh, you know, this and this and this, and it's like, well, actually, you start looking back, it's like you know, you'll get certain people say, oh, you know, aliens don't exist, and say, well, scientific mathematicians saying that it's not only probable that that other planets exist, but it's probable that there are thousands of planets just in our galaxy, and there are millions, I repeat, millions, or actually billions, I think it is now, of known galaxies in the universe. So you know, and you even have a lot of the scientists now saying, oh yeah, there's definitely life out there, it's just we don't think it's been here yet. You know,
I'm like burning to just jump in here because it's making me think about a few things. My husband is a mathematician. And we've had conversations about the separation between science and spiritualism, and that creates a problem. To me, it is one and the same thing when you take the parameters out of it. It's just we don't look at it that way. The one thing I will say, my husband is very open to the experiences that people have told him they've had, including mine. He says, I don't have those experiences. And I understand that. Now, I see other things from him that he's not even cognizant of. For example, I say to him, the dogs and the cats love you more than they love me. And he'll be like, no, they don't. I'm like, yeah, they do. He still doesn't believe me because he does have an aura, an energy. They gravitate to him, and there's no explanation other than that for me. He didn't grow up with animals the way I did. But to put a note on it, during a conversation I had with James, my husband, you know, we used to talk about, you know, well, black holes, do they exist? Wormholes, do they really exist? Do aliens exist? The possibilities are endless. He can say, yes, they've theoretically given us this to show that, to demonstrate that, yeah, black holes probably do exist. Have we actually experienced one? Probably not. You know, we just don't have the capacity to go out there unless you're really skilled at astral travel. I am not. But the one thing I will say about, you know, having these conversations with James is, he made a very poignant statement to me once, and that's another thing that I will never forget, even in my older years. I asked him, I said once in a time of confusion, I asked him, I said, do you believe that I am experiencing these things, or do you ever see the mist out there when I point it out to you? And he said, honey, I don't see it. He said, but I believe you when you tell me you do. And he brought up this example of, in science and with math and with anybody who's involved in physics or engineering or any type of you know, experiential stuff like that. He said, people always want a finite answer. They want it solved. And he said, I am okay with not knowing if there's life out there. He said, I am okay with not knowing what happens when you die. He said, a lot of people want to know that. He said, I don't know if this stuff will ever come to fruition in my lifetime. And he said, I don't know if I have a soul that's going to move on after I die. And he said, honey, I'm okay with that. And I just, it floored me, that simple statement. So I get okay with just hearing some of the out there stuff that is beyond me, because I'm like, I don't have any basis for comparison for myself. But, I can certainly accept when people say they have, done astral travel through something. I'm like, okay, because I have a few friends that have had things that they consider quite frightening experiences. And I'm like, that's not something I've really ever done. Maybe that's not for me. But it does exist. And I am certain that when I look out my window, or I go outside to feed the foxes or the deer that are outside at night, which I do on a regular basis, we're in a hot ground for a lot of Civil War stuff. We have a Civil War tunnel just a little ways away. And I always saw little spheres of, bright blue that would come in through the forest and go away in seconds. And I realized what they were. And then I started to see faint forms just in a row down the street. It's soldiers. And I don't say that to a lot of people lightly, because most people are like, oh, come on. They're there. I'm not exactly sure if they want me to do anything at this point. All I can do is offer the dead, if you'd like me to help you move on, please let me know in a way that I can understand. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't.
Mm.
But my husband, he accepts that, okay, that stuff is there. There's a lot of other little things out there, elementals, that watchers that come and check in on me to make sure I'm not hurting the animals. And I could sit here for hours and tell stories of seeing weird beings that I thought were deer, but were actually behaving like dogs, come in through the forest, sit on the yard, watch me for 5 minutes and go and leave. I've sat outside on my yard, at midnight, and I've heard growling in a circular pattern around me. And I'm like, well, I don't see anything. Okay. I'm coming to understand what those things are in the environment. And I'm coming to understand that they have a place where I am in this parameter of Earth. And that's exactly what we're on. And you know what? I'm okay with that.
It is.
I say that with humor, because a lot of times I'm not, but.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's one thing. I mean, I think I've always been naturally, but it is, you've got to find the human stuff. You've got to find the chill. I mean, there's an old saying I've said for many years, and it's interesting. I've said this a couple of times, quite a few times on the show, that 20 years ago, this saying would get me in trouble. Nowadays, people sort of accept it. And the saying is, things aren't good or bad; they just are.
That's right.
And 20 years ago, but murderers and this and that, and it's like, yes, I understand. The whole point is, like, firstly, like, once, but firstly, if you knew that you could reincarnate over and over again, or at least a certain number of times, if you know that you're not, if you die, it doesn't matter, because you'll just move on to the next life. If you know that this is technically, it's therefore some sort of illusion or dream, or it's something you're learning from, then everything that happens. There's a great saying that there's a being channeled called Bashar. I don't know if you've heard of him. And Bashar says, and the funny thing is that I've heard this in the Chinese say almost the same thing, is that everything that exists is meant to exist. Period.
Okay.
Everything that exists is meant to exist. So, all the, the atrocity, the bad, the good, everything is meant to exist. And when you put it into somebody's life, okay, I can appreciate, about people like Hitler and whatnot, these terrible things that they did. But how many times have bad things that have happened in your life have been flipped into something good? Or from that bad thing, you've learned something and you've evolved from it. Everything is an evolution, like you said from the beginning. You're evolving. We're all evolving, and therefore, we can, when we get trapped in the illusion that we see this and that, and we're separate, and there's good and there's bad, and everything else. But when you have science, like if you study quantum physics and you study that, go all the way back to the 1900s. Quantum physics is that old, and they go back to the 1900s, and they were doing the single split experiment, where they're passing particles of light, and when they observed it, it showed as different particles. But when they didn't observe it, it showed as a wave. So, and what that basically means is the observer affects the experiment. So whatever you observe, you can change and alter. And there was something else that this happened more, I think it was the 50s or late 60s, is that the scientists wanted to, because quantum physics was getting stronger and stronger, and they were saying everything is interconnected. And the scientific community wanted to prove once and for all whether we were or we weren't connected. And they found that there is a field of energy, which they call the field, that connects every single particle, every single atom, every single being. And when they affect that field, it affects everything else. That everything is affected. So just like ripples on the water,
it's a wave. It is. That's exact. But the one thing I would say in terms of the human experience is just be careful of the wake you leave. There are people who will still be on this earth that may benefit or not from the wake each person leaves. And that is a very strong life lesson for me as well. It's funny when you talk about good and evil. When I first started learning Reiki, my instructor, she came from a Polish Catholic background. And so for her to switch gears and learn other ways of looking at things in her life experience was quite poignant. But when she posed to me, it's not about good and evil, it's about fear and love and nothing else, I really struggled with that. And I thought she probably thought she was going to lose me, because that was a difficult thing. And I will not sit here and tell you, oh, I have completely accepted that, but I've come closer to seeing that in action. I see it in little tiny things. So I would say to anybody viewing, keep your awareness open of even the tiniest things in your day, because they may mean very little to you, but you may have sparked something positive for someone else, or it may come back to you and be like, wow, this is what this meant. It's like we talk about the darkness and the light, and the truth is one cannot exist without the other. And it's like, I've kind of been a recipient of a few negative impulses, things that come into the room, things that try to invade my personal space, including my human body. There you go. Thank you so much. Are you going to whack someone on the head with that?
There's a whole story about this.
It looks like the Thor mallet. That's what it looks like.
Yes.
Yeah.
The friend used to be a past co-host, Ethan. He actually creates soft toys because the whole point of play fighting was that it's a way of experiencing and learning, and so he created warhammers to actually for adults or children to play with, and I got him to create the Tai Chi warhammer. So it's got it going one way, it's going one way on there, and it's going that way on there. So there's a male and female, but this is, people call this yin yang. It's actually called Tai Chi. It's reasons called Tai Chi.
Yin yang, it's the earth connection and the life connection. Yeah.
But its true name, or this, is actually Tai Chi, because they are in harmony. We're talking about the way, the Tao. They are balanced. So when they're not balanced, and I have a whole white circle, a whole black circle, half black, half white, that is yin yang. that is the opposing opposites. And that's where our society has been, and modern society sort of likes this good and bad, this or that, male and female. But this is supposed to represent nature, and nature is yin going into yang, night going into day. You have feminine aspects being a man, and you have masculine aspects being a woman.
And as well as you have past lives as both, and probably other beings as well.
That, because that goes into an interesting. I don't know if you want to bring that up, but
I just opened up a whole new bag.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm still in, like, you talking about the beings and in your bathroom. I still want to get back to that as well.
Oh, okay.
But very quickly, like, there is this interesting one. I mean, it's a touchy, not as much as it was 20 years ago. Still a touchy subject for some people, but people who people who are gay, or people of the transgender, is that the interesting thing in the Eastern philosophy, they would say that those souls were, for a long period of time, if they are now male, they, for a long period of time, they were feminine, and they still. And when you speak to people who are transgender, or want to be transgender, and you speak to them, I feel a woman trapped in a man's body, and if reincarnation is true, which actually science is actually getting to that point, that not exactly mainstream. Right. But because in India, and they've got thousands of case studies in India and China especially, where they've got children who have grown up where they're not as restricted as us. They don't get told off as quickly about saying things that don't sound normal. And they were saying, these children growing up saying, I was a man, little girls saying, I was a man in this village. And they go to this village and they ask certain questions, and there's thousands of case studies in India and China especially of this, where they found, people, that they've gone to remote villages where this person says they were born. So there is evidence slowly building up for reincarnation. But the whole point of is that this thing of transgender, or somebody who is interested in more in same sex, is that the thing will be is that an old soul, especially since 2012, things have opened up where the barriers are slowly sort of dissolving, and that you can be feel like, or you can be a woman trapped in a man's body, because if you was a woman for many lifetimes and now you're a man, and we say, oh, that's crazy, but if reincarnation is true, then straight away that would make sense, that logically, however illogical it sounds, logically that would make sense if reincarnation is possible. And of course, that was, so there's so that thing of, like, the yin and the yang, and it's all about balance. It's all about seeking balance and seeking.
Right. And certainly I hope that I'm sure no one here would misunderstand that to mean it doesn't mean go out and rob a bank. It doesn't mean go out and hurt someone with the intent of hurting. That's not what this is about. It happens enough anyway. I can't say, oh, that's because it's a life lesson. He's going to hit you with the mallet if you do.
No, but the whole point is that this also represents karma. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So yes, if you go and rob a bank, there will be, forget normal law, universal law will have an action for that, especially if you're harming somebody or hurting somebody. There will be an action for that. There will be.
I think that there are just remnants of those past lives that come through in the current life that may be unresolved, or they remain because it's a glitch, or because it's useful in some way. I'm not really sure about, in terms of karma, the way I've been learning it and the way I've come to accept it is that it's more about you having an agreement in this lifetime, whether you want to call it an Akashic record, a contract, that you are going to learn some major tenets in this lifetime, and the karma is not necessarily the way they say karma is a bitch. Well, no, it is a debt. It is a debt on every soul that comes back down here to learn something. You have a reason for being here, but it doesn't give you a license to have ill intent. And that's a whole thing that we could get into about other spiritual practices and whether your intent is good or bad or misguided. And that's where working with, light beings is important. But it comes right down to reflecting back on love and fear. And I used to tell myself so many times that while I accept that anger is something that is fear-based, I used to think rage was simply this guttural, visceral response here on earth to something. It's a mama bear protecting her young. That's rage. It's still related to fear. And I know this through personal experience. And it's a hard lesson to sit and look at those things because we put judgment on them. That's where we want to remove that word, get rid of the judgment, because we all screw up, we all lie, we all judge, we do things that we wish we had not done, and we can learn from them. We will always be judged, and we cannot expect perfection. We can't accept that everyone will like us no matter what, but there's a reason for those things to go. There's a flow. We're not going to know that till we ascend. So I think people should stop pressuring themselves to ascend while they're here on earth. If it happens for you, that's fantastic. Let me know. I'd like to hear the experience. But for me, I've got my feet on the ground and I'm going to keep looking at what's in front of me.
Yeah, and that's what counts.
Yeah.
Is what's in front of you. Right. So.
All right.
So, entities in your house.
Yes.
So that's interesting because I do many different techniques or the many different skills I learn, but in essence they go under two umbrellas. Apart from the Taoist umbrella, I go under Barefoot Doctor, and a Barefoot Doctor could sort of one of my friends would describe a Barefoot Doctor as sort of like a spiritual scientist or a spiritual doctor, in the essence of he's got different techniques that they can use. Traditionally, a Barefoot Doctor is actually female as well, and the barefoot was actually a metaphor for they go from place to place, they travel about, was what was meant by barefoot. And the Barefoot Doctor has different techniques and different systems, but looks at each individual and then works out, say I've got 10 things here, and say, oh right, well this person needs 1, 3, and 7. But this person needs 5, 9, and 2, and so on and so forth. So Barefoot Doctor is like a spiritual scientist, and so sees things in a scientific way, but sees energy in a scientific way. So, and that's where my quantum physics and yet spirituality blend nicely. Now, the Dragon Dog Shaman is the other one, and the Dragon Dog Shaman were my friend. You would say if Barefoot Doctor is a spiritual scientist, the other one is more like more like a scientific magician or a spiritual scientific magician, because the shaman, the Dragon Dog Shaman, would know that the ley lines of the planet is everything is energy, and ley lines obviously gather energy. And when you go to certain ley lines, you can connect into that energy. When you go to a forest, you'll connect to the energy of the trees, and obviously the guardians, the sprites, are the protectors of the forest, and so on and so forth. So different areas have different energies, and so a Dragon Dog Shaman would use that to their advantage by they could tap into. I used to do this talking about sort of talking about Stonehenge or Salisbury, I used to do this awesome little trick that used to freak people out, which is get a crystal, get some piece of copper or copper bracelet. I used to have a copper bracelet and a crystal. I placed them on my hand, and then I would walk around because I can see and feel energy, chi. So I would go, right, so okay, so we're lined up with this ley line, we're lined up with this energy. So I put my hand on top now, you put your hand in the center, and on certain ones they'll be blasted with heat, on other ones they'll be blasted with cold. The other and some they couldn't even put their hand in. They'll be going, what's going on? Every time they try to put their hand in, it will be pushed away. And you know, it's deemed as magic, and the shaman is, you know, like connecting with the entities and the spirits and the different energies, and it seems like magic. But there's actually a show called Babylon 5. I don't know if you ever watched. And they had the magi, the scientific magician. They were saying it's not magic. It seems like magic. It's just science that you haven't figured out yet. And in essence, that's what they would say in Taoism. They say
that's exactly right.
It's just knowledge that we haven't quite figured out.
I agree. It's so funny that you bring that stuff up. You know, my husband loves science fiction. He's an avid reader of science fiction. And the one thing I will say, you know, where I can get very profound just inklings and messages of, you know, things. He loves to watch stuff like Doctor Who. I'm not that into it. You know, that's just not me. But he got me to watch the Holistic Detective on BBC. What's the guy's name? The actual name. Now I'm blanking out. Anyway, I digress. I'll go to the point. On the show, Dirk Gently, that's the character's name, Holistic Detective. My husband was really excited about that coming on. So the first season, he's like, just watch it. I've recorded it. I just want you to see it. I'm like, all right. So, you know, I'm watching it and I actually am enjoying it. So we're down in the dog's room. They have their own couch and all that stuff. We're just watching it with the dogs and I'm watching it. But Dirk Gently, the character, turns to his assistant in one of the episodes, the first one, and he said, all your life, you've been making choices out of desperation. When you take control, life will get interesting. And it was the strangest feeling for me. I just turned around and I looked behind me. My husband was sitting on the edge of the couch with the two dogs, and they're all looking at me like, oh, yeah. And I, of course, me defensively going, shut up. But that's something that stayed with me. We make choices in this lifetime, and sometimes we do make them with the best of intentions or out of desperation, and we learn later that, oh, there's another way. And it's okay to like forgive yourself for those mistakes. It's okay to forgive yourself for the choice you made. And for me to even use the word mistake, quite frankly, you don't have to. You know, there are different paths of evolution, and everybody's going to choose the one intrinsically that's right to them. So anyway, I do like that show, by the way, Dirk Gently. So I'm just letting you know, I completely appreciate that.
Yeah. And well, the thing, another Taoist saying is like everyone and everything is your sifu. So, you know, like you know, you know, your aim is to be a sifu, but everything, you know, and they mean everything. They mean the birds, the wind, you know, the water you drink, the food. But it also is that everything is the old saying, an old Taoist saying is that everything is talking to you all the time. But the Tao, the universe, tends to whisper. You know, a little bit like intuition. When they talk about intuition and ego, which is quite funny because in China they have either Buddha or Taoist thought. Taoist is normally a circle, so Buddha is an actual being. So you'll have actually crop time. So Well, actually, I only got one prop. But so you'd have Buddha, which is intuition, on one shoulder, and what I don't have yet is monkey mind, ego, on the other shoulder.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing is in the West that came up as the devil and the angel sitting on your shoulder. But the whole idea is that you have these two sitting on your shoulder, and here comes the hammer again. And this is actually what this is talking about, is that you are this line here. This line here is you. And in true, when you sit in a meditation hall, well, I saw it in a meditation and told my Sifu, he smiles and nodded wisely as he does, as he did. This is a silver mist, and this is the Tao. This is you trying to find the balance. And these two, this is the yin and the yang, in the yang and the yin. And so you have, the intuition, it whispers, and ego shouts, and ego. What
ego is a child. Ego is a 2-year-old for life. Yeah, just like my dog.
I've always loved dogs. I'm very, like I say, I'm born in the year of the dog. I did say that earlier. And but I always seem to be surrounded by cats. It's cats that I always seem. When I've had partners, it's always cats. It's always cats. But I love dogs. I'm a great, especially huskies or wolves. But anyway, I digress. But yeah, so the ego, when that shouts, and the ego, you have to, whatever it tells you, you really want to do the opposite, because it's still a Sifu, it's still trying to teach you, but it's so you shouldn't do that, or you're feeling I really can't be bothered to get up and go and do some exercise.
Well, I think in terms of that, listening to your ego or listening to your soul piece, it's hard sometimes. People say, well, I didn't have a choice, that's why I had to do this. It's like, well, no, there always are choices. Sometimes the choices stink. They do. And a lot of times we have to take and make choices based with the information we're given. I'm with the whole ego and non-egoic stuff, I feel like when I go through my ego, that's when I become the inflexible Michelle, this, and to let that go for me is quite good. And I think that, in terms of working and, learning some new things in shamanism and a different way to work with the community, getting to know that there are egoic spirit guides and non-egoic spirit guides, the ones that are there for your best interest, and the egoic ones will help you, but usually there's a price to pay along with it. That's something new to me. And in terms of working with the spiritual stuff in my home, it's also helped me understand a lot of the fear that goes on. A lot of times when we describe something as an evil entity or something that means to hurt, usually I'm finding it is a spirit that is presenting itself in a certain way because it's afraid of change. It's stuck. Well, you can choose fear or love. So how are you going to treat that spirit? Will you be manipulated if it's an egoic spirit? You might be. And I've certainly had that happen to me. I've had some really weird instances in here. But, then I realized there are things that I was seeing. I didn't understand what I was seeing. And then when I had help from a shaman and I had, help from my professor, it comes to fruition and you start to understand. I feel like, humans, we have a role to play, each of us. We may not know, but just trust that you are on the path you're supposed to be on and that you are not alone. There is something guiding you, even when you don't sense it, even when you don't feel it, even when you don't believe it. You're being propelled in certain ways, and there are choices. There is free will. You can make a choice. It's not necessarily wrong or bad or good, but it's going to catapult you in a different direction. What are you going to do with it when that happens?
Yeah, 100%. And you know, that big thing about like the whole thing of that love and fear is it's a big one, I think, for a lot of people to get, because it's, oh but it's based on this and it's this and it's this. It all boils down to love and fear. It all boils down to yin and yang, in one respect. But the whole thing of that symbol, like yin and yang, is that it's all subjective. Because yang can be expansive and yin can be contractive. So that is more yang than this. But this to this becomes more yang. So it's always about the opinion. So when you're saying something is good or something's bad, it's always subjective to something else.
Right. And it's that whole thing of being present during the experiment, the observer, and how they're affecting. Right?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, baby.
I think just as a caveat, I mean, to all of it, it's like when a person is working spiritually with someone, whoever they may be, whether it's a client who's paying for a service, and I've had this experience just in providing classes to people on certain issues. I think it's as a learner, and we are all learning, just be careful in any realm, spiritually, to not expect a result. I had a lady, for example, say to me, I was giving a class on anger and rage, and she said, I came here because I thought you were going to help me just get rid of it. Mm-hmm. That's not the job that any of us play. That is not what happens. We do this. None of this spiritual stuff is a problem solver. There's always going to be something coming in or replacing what was there. It all changes. It affects everything else. So I think it's very important to be clear and fair about that. I'm all for using energies as a healing capacity. It does work, but everything is in relation to everything else about the person with whom you're working. And you cannot forget that. I'm not gonna judge anybody else's, claims about what some spiritual modalities work versus others versus Western medical science. It all works. And there is a chemical mixture of them all together that may be more effective for one person, whereas someone else, no. And it's like, I think the best thing we can do is, if we're practitioners with a particular energy frame like Reiki, or if we're working with, Qigong, just help every person achieve their best interest in that and make sure they understand and figure out if it's working for them. It's when we put those human parameters of earning the money or the fees and well, is it best for everybody ultimately if you're treating someone with an energy that may not work for them? It has to be left open so people understand that there may be modalities out there that I'm not working with. I don't know as much about or anything about, but here, let's try this. And that's the angle I always want to come from. That, I know it's funny. I'm not an expert in anything, but I know what I know. And I also know, as you may know, and I know this about what you know, and you know what I know.
I know nothing.
I don't either. I don't even know you. Who are you? Just know that. See, I keep using the word "know." It's getting on my nerves. We can learn things about new fields and find out if they're really intrinsic to us, or conversely, is it something that maybe spoke to us in a past lifetime? Mm-hmm. I can give you another perfect example. As a child, I used to do rituals. without you know what that was about. I remember distinctly doing things, burning things, crushing things together, making little poultices. And I'm pretty sure, based on some of the research I did in Glastonbury in January, and then just things that have happened, that I may have been some kind of witch or pagan, worker at some point, or I was, and this is probably a long time ago. It doesn't mean that's who I am right now. It just means there are remnants and reflections of who we were before, and they're still with us. But it's like, I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, I'm going to use that to cast spells on people and try to manipulate surroundings, because the bottom line is this: nothing has power over anybody else unless you give it that power. So that's like the last thing I can leave anybody viewing with is, how invested are you in this? It will affect you as much as you allow it to be. And that can be from a love or fear base. So I say this to people who are experiencing Reiki. I say, if you don't believe in it at all, you may not benefit as much from it. You may get something or you may get nothing. Try it. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, try it again. Just like anything else, Tai Chi, Qigong, shamanism, find what works for you and go with it, but accept that there are other things for other people.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest barefoot. The whole thing of the barefoot doctor, is have different skills, because what doesn't work with that, if you've only got one thing, you've only got one lid, and you've got a square box, it's not going to work. But if you've got several lids, you'll find one that will work. And the whole thing of a barefoot doctor.
Or if you're like me on one of my rough days, you're going to take that circular lid and try to jam it into a square box with a hammer, and be like swearing about why doesn't there you go, the Thor hammer, why doesn't it work? So but the thing is it's a rough journey at times, but let's just choose to laugh at it. That's all you can do.
My name, the name that was given to me, is Taiso Bogi. Bogi comes from, it's actually Korean, and it means the balance between the chaos and the calmness, or the balancer. Now the whole idea is it's both personal and also outwardly as well, as in my life there will be times of pure chaos and pure calmness, almost all at the same time, or 1 minute it's chaos, 1 minute it's calmness. And also that and that was meant to, that was a signify my relationship with the spirit. Was that the things were wild and crazy, that like one of the things my teachers were actually evolved heavily within the diplomatic circles and military circles. And what a lot of people don't know is that they're because us muggles or the people in certain circles, in certain military circles, in private businesses, in FT100 businesses, they use psychics, they use empaths.
Of course they do. Remote viewing.
All this is astral traveling. Remote viewing is another is what, and that was taught both in America and to the American nerds. But if you ever watch the movie, The Men That Stare at Goats, with George Clooney, that I know, who they're based on. I know who they're based on. I know that whole story. I know that whole thing. I know that the CIA had remote viewers that came to Lockerbie, a place came to London, saying that there was going to be a plane explode and crash in Scotland, and they came 6 hours before, between 6 and 9 hours before, but they knew the rough area, but they couldn't give the precise location, and that was the Lockerbie bombing. That was the Lockerbie. There are so many things, and I've known there's a friend of mine's also a co-host, Anne Jersh. She herself has done things with police, and I know, you know, police have used psychics many times, because, you know, the interesting thing, when you go into the higher circles, there's this thing of, they don't care what it is if it works. If it works, they don't care. And that's but you know, look down in the lower, you know, in general public, we you know, that's nonsense, that's rubbish. But there are you know, businesses, you know, like I say, FT100 businesses. There are military organisations that use what we call woo-woo, or what some people call woo-woo, this psychic spies or psychic stuff, this nonsense. They've been using it for decades.
Right.
So it's, you know, it's a case of what works for you. You know what, you know, the whole thing of the observer affects the experiment. That's the interesting thing with faith healing. For a lot of people in faith healing is, I don't believe in that. Well, then that's your belief. You know that it won't work because you say it won't work. There is an interesting thing of, on the shaman side, is that if the healer's belief is stronger than the patient's disbelief, it can overcome it. But as you said, there is a karma point of view. There is a thing of, and this is what happened in Reiki, the stories in Reiki where sensei, or as we say in the West, master Usui, or Usi, depending how you say his name, he healed people. You know, he went into the homeless and he healed and he helped them. But then he noticed that years later they were coming back, and if people are not ready, they'll come back. You know, is that you have to be ready for that information. You have to be ready for that healing.
Yeah, and I mean, and don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's a good way to put it. That, you know, yeah, maybe you can walk away from something and it won't work for you. Certainly, I've met people who are definitely healers, and, you know, whether I would say that they are moral is another question. You know, I'm not going to go into that, but, you know, that's kind of like the dichotomy that we live with here on Earth, is that, you know, don't ever use that energy as a license to do something that you would not accept being done to you. So, you know, that's where I'm gonna like draw that line at me being like, judge. But, you know, it's like, for me, you know, my husband and I have this conversation quite frequently about a moral code. For me is, you don't hurt kids and you don't hurt animals. And for me, that is a line that's drawn for me. I don't put up with that. I don't purposely look at hurting other people, but that evokes something visceral in me when that occurs. And that's something that is intrinsic to me and that I have to work with. And, you know, it's like, I think the best thing you can do in those instances is realize, and I think this is probably true for most people, there is a Latin saying, but I don't know Latin, that what drives you, what you love the most, is also the thing that will ultimately destroy you, the thing that hurts you the most. And, you know, throughout my lifetime, trying to rescue animals, trying to help little kids, when I see forms of abuse or hear of it and what that means to me, and it's not just based on my daily personal human experience, it's also based on that spiritual boundaries that I have. I have a pretty good feeling, for me, those things are what I need to learn. So everybody here on Earth has to figure out, what is the biggest conflict for me? And now I need to figure out what to think about with that. And that goes back to the whole thing of, ascension and spirituality is not this, you know, puppies and kittens, roses and fresh air and sunlight thing. It's pulling your hair out. It's taking the Thor hammer and beating yourself over the head with it a lot, because there you go. Thank you, sir. You know, but it's like, that's, you know, you have to accept that things are not perfect, but it's not perfect by design.
Yeah, because yeah, that whole thing, or the saying I always thought was irritating, but at the same time is really true, is that the whole thing with you don't really want perfection, because perfection, then there's nothing to learn, there's nothing to grow, there's nothing to do. What if
what's
everything
the
was
point?
perfect? Yeah, what's the point? Which is we should saw that thing of, or at least the old saying, the saying of when Christians originally came over to China, and they were talking about heaven and earth, and the Chinese, the old Chinese were saying, yeah, but who would want to go to a heaven? Everything's perfect. You get bored. That's why we reincarnate. That's why we go over and over again to learn new stuff.
Right.
But they have, there is, in Buddhism, there is a nirvana, there is a place, but it's almost seen as a stopover. It's seen as, you go there to, it's almost like a holiday. You go there and you chill out. Well, a good holiday. You go there and chill out, and then you come, you come back. It's more of a reprieve, a rest, rather than somewhere, the end goal. And I think the interesting thing, is that people are still looking at things in sections. They're still seeing things of, this whole thing, good or bad, or ascension is this and that's it, and that's no,
it's not. And it's probably going to be different based on everybody's perception. In terms of, like, for me, one of the things that I'm quite clearer on, not completely clear, is that my place may be more toward working with the dead and not with the living, but I don't know if that is certain yet. I've certainly had a couple of people, primarily my Reiki instructor, and then also my shamanic practitioner who's been working with me. They've made statements, and I've heard this over time, and it's one of those things that just kind of, sits in the background, saying, the biggest way to say, you're a bridge between the living and the dead. And I'm like, well, I've had it said to me in that way verbatim, you're a bridge between two worlds. And I'm like, well, I know I experience some different things right now that I don't understand. So that's also where, for me personally, my evolution is going. I can't say professionally that, I only do Reiki on people. That's not what's been happening, but it's hard to go out and tell people about that stuff because, what are you going to do?
Indeed. Right. I think I'm loving this conversation, and I think you and I could probably go on for a couple of hours.
Yeah, I think people are asleep now, and you're almost at your bedtime now, aren't you?
It's only 9 o'clock, but yeah, I think we'll wrap this one up. But I think we need. Even if it's just a private one-on-one, I would love to chat with you again. I think
that would be nice.
I think I definitely see that in. I don't normally read cards, but I definitely see that in the cards. Mm-hmm. So that would be awesome. So for the audience, there was not too many messages. Any others? The Mighty Fred Bleach. He knows Babylon 5 very well, and he says they were called techno mages. The people that I talking, they were the techno mages. But I love that idea of, and I've heard it so many times that magic is just science that you haven't figured out.
Science.
Yeah.
Science.
Science.
That's great.
But anyway, so for the audience, I hope you enjoyed it. It's a bit of a longer. The old ones we used to do were 2 hours, and then I sort of cut them down to an hour. But today, apparently, no, we're going to have a long one. So I've enjoyed it immensely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I had a good time.
Oh, and me too. But just don't quite go anywhere yet.
All right.
But for the audience, I hope you enjoyed it. You take care. The next show is Let's see if I can bring it up in 2 seconds. It is Chantel and Chantel Renee and the. Can I quickly find out what her show is about? No. Chantel Renee is on Friday at 7:30 UK time. So I hope to see you guys then. Otherwise, take care. Goodbye for now. Goodbye from myself. Goodbye from this wonderful lady.
Bye.
And
Thank you.
and take care. Bye for now. Love, Chi, and Shen from us and the Way of Conscious Mindfulness. Bye-bye.